Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean and Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin. I'm a certified health coach, trainer, and author. And this podcast is for middle-aged men and women looking to optimize their health and get their bodies back to what it once was 10 to 15 years ago. I will give you simple, actionable items to get long-term sustainable results. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin. I hope you had a great weekend. Happy Tuesday if you're listening to this on Tuesday. And hopefully listen to my interview with ultra endurance athlete and coach Luke Tyberski. We talked all about his bouts with depression, how he overcame it, and how to become a high achiever, both in sport and at work. His incredible run that he did, 2,000 kilometers from Morocco to Monaco. And anything from just getting started with running to becoming a high achiever. So really enjoyed my interview with Luke Tyberski. Definitely check that out. And if you are watching this on YouTube, because every one of my episodes is on YouTube, I'm wearing my blue light blocking glasses. I know it looks really fancy and the lighting might not be that great. I'm working on fixing that. But either way, I'm filming this at night. So that is why it's a little bit darker than normal, but it's past 8 o'clock. So I typically wear my glasses. So anyways, thanks so much for listening. We're going to touch today on a topic that Luke and I talked about on the interview. And that was regarding mental health. I think this is something that is obviously equally as important as our physical health, and something that, maybe on this podcast and in general is not talked about enough. A lot of times it sort of takes a back seat to a lot of other things that go on, but it's about time we prioritize our mental health, focus on building healthy habits that'll help us maintain our mental and emotional wellness. So I wanted to, Luke touched on his, I think it was 7-8 years of dealing with depression, anxiety, insomnia. And really, his only outlet was, going for like long runs. And eventually he talked with someone, having someone to talk to, whether it's a family member or like a third party, I think is so important. We're going to touch on that. And I'm going to just hit on maybe some other habits that, we've touched on already, but it doesn't hurt to reinforce the fact that not only will this help you physically, but it'll also hopefully help you emotionally. And I think that's something that you want to just, keep an eye on, whether it's yourself or your kids, or family members. And so some of these habits, maybe you're doing, maybe you're not, but it's time to start, prioritizing these habits, things like sleep, things like exercising regularly. The thing about sleep is, a lack of it can sort of compound and create the stress, anxiety, depression. And essentially that's almost like what happened with Luke. He suffered from insomnia, almost like he mentioned at one point for the week, he'd have like only 8 to 10 hours that week of sleep. And so, he was almost doing self-harm on himself, and eventually got out of that. But having some type of sleep schedule, a routine that you do tonight, that you do every night, that you can stick to. I always talk about trying to go to bed and waking up around the same time. If you could get 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, I know for some people that's difficult to do, but it's all about prioritizing it. And maybe one thing you might want to do is get some blue light blocking glasses. Start putting those on in the evening if you do have to look at screens. Keeping your bedroom cool, a cool, dark place really promotes healthy sleep habits. My wife and I keep it at probably 65, 66 degrees every night, and we black it out. So it is dark. It is a sleep cave. So if you're falling asleep on the couch, probably not a good idea. Let's fall asleep in bed, maybe do some reading, and something that sort of calms the mind. And that sort of leads into my next sort of topic, which is mindfulness. Obviously we've talked about this before, and it doesn't have to be a long sort of mindfulness routine. It could be a 10-minute, sort of meditation, There's so many different apps that you can use nowadays. Calm is one of them. I've used probably half a dozen of them I've tried. But meditation, breathing exercises, things like this that sort of calm your mind, reduce any negative thoughts, and they definitely can improve your well-being. So doing that, exercising regularly, which obviously we talk all about. Exercise is a great way to improve mood, reduce stress, anxiety. You release those endorphins. Some people really get that from running. I'm not a big runner. I like to go to the gym, and it doesn't have to be for a long time. It could be 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. But you could go for a walk, which is big. I typically walk 2 to 3 times a day with my dogs. I do love yoga. I haven't been doing as much lately, but at times I do it probably 2 times a week. You just have to prioritize this stuff. Again, yoga could be 20 minutes in your basement, 15 minutes in your basement. I do think there's some value to going to classes. So if you could go to a class, that'd be great, especially just starting out. Also, too, something that doesn't get touched on too much is the social connections that we can make. Just connecting with others. And, what I notice is as we get older, we're sort of in our own little bubble. And I think it's important to connect, take time out of your busy schedule, make plans, have people come over. I definitely we try to host people at our house as much as possible, friends, loved ones, maybe colleagues of my wife's. And it could just be a simple, hour get together. It doesn't have to take all night. But connecting with others, I think, is so important. Something that I think we lost touch with a little bit with COVID, obviously, but now now we're all back to normal. Eating healthy, obviously, is a big one. Food is not only just about, helping you maybe look a certain way, maybe, but it can also help you reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression. Focusing on nutrient-dense foods that are, high in, vitamins and minerals, can be essential for brain function. And just limiting processed fried foods and, real sugary drinks. I think that's, obviously got to be a priority. And then lastly, and Luke touched about this in our podcast, was the fact that he found an individual to talk to, a third party. And I've used third parties in the past. At one point, my dad and I would have, 30-minute to hour just talks about, life and what's going on. And I think that's important. It doesn't have to be with a loved one, but we probably did it for a good 8 to 10 years of, at least once a week or once every couple of weeks getting together and talking. And actually something that I'd like to get back into it now that I'm more of an older adult. I'm in my 40s now, but we did this probably from like 20 to 30 years of my life, when I was 20 years old to about when I was 30-ish, in that range, maybe even a little bit older. You build a deeper connection with yourself, but also with the individual. And if you rather talk to someone that's, outside of your realm, I think that's great too, because you can, it's sort of like a blank slate. And it's a great way to externalize our emotions, gain some valuable perspective on things, on any struggles that we're going through. So, speaking with someone who's trained to handle mental health concerns, I think is important too. Can give you valuable tools and sort of these coping mechanisms that we might have never considered on our own. So this is, I think, a huge strategy that I've used, that Luke talked about in our interview. Maintaining a healthy lifestyle is obviously key to optimal mental health. These habits that I've mentioned: regular exercise, good nutrition, quality sleep, mindfulness, social connections, and talking with someone can really help maintain or improve your mental health and emotional well-being. And, I always say, don't wait, right? Don't keep putting it off. Take those next steps right away. There'll never be a perfect time to do some of these things. So why not do it tomorrow? And I think, a lot of times we just sort of put things off when, our mental health should be our first priority every day. And doing these habits can go a long way and make a big difference in the long run. So that's all I wanted to touch on today. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, Brian@briangrid.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes for my new book, Stepladder System, where we talk all about my 6 pillars of health and ways to strategize to become the best version of yourself. So I put a lot of effort into that book. I definitely check it out. I think you really will enjoy it. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. Happy Father's Day week. Also, it's my birthday tomorrow, so June 14th. So it's going to be a great week. And I will talk to you on Friday with another great interview. Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.